But if it's an infinite amount of money, it's just like, hey, I need some money to go send to Ukraine. Print, export to Ukraine, and yeah, that's basically how it's been. Hey, I need some resources from Africa. Oh, you don't want to give them to me? Okay, I'll just export war over there, and then create some instability, get what I want, and then come back. Especially in today's time when we're in this misinformation era, where a lot of people don't know what's kind of true. The difference between me and a lot of people is that I verify things. Like I don't trust, I verify. So I'll literally go and fly to an Egypt and go and see. And I'm like, oh, well,
Oh yeah,
this
man.
looks obvious. Yeah, I'll fly to a Ghana, and go see, and then I'll go to Latin America, or I'll go there. I want to see it myself, and then I'll be able to, because I truly believe that I trust myself more than I trust anybody else. So because there's not many people that have my wide array of skill sets. I'm a warfare specialist. I did 4 years in the Army, 9 months in Afghanistan. I am really expert in macroeconomics, microeconomics, geopolitics, and also technology. So, and also, I've traveled around the world, so I have so much different angles. I have a panoramic viewpoint, and ultimately for me, especially what we built with Helicode is, did the customer win, right? Did Africa win? Did the global South win? Because that's the whole point of the product, right? Did Web3 win, right? That's the whole point of the product, is to help to export intellectual human resource to, the globe, right? And for a cheaper or more affordable cost basis.
This is the Mooncast.
See you, Space Cowboy.
Bro, it's really, really good to get a chance and opportunity to get you on the podcast, man, dude. Um, we had some really, really amazing conversations in the past. And before I even get to any of the conversations that we've had in the past, I wanted the audience to kind of get a little bit of a depiction of who you are, where you've come from, and how and why you're in the Web3 space currently right now.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Jasper. Currently based in the U.S. and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Coinsub. I'll get into that a little bit later. But I've been in the crypto space since about 2012, 2013. Call it buying things online, right? And so I've watched the industry change, and kind of through my professional career, I was doing enterprise tech transformation. So I was at PwC doing Oracle and SAP implementations for like Fortune 50s, right? Meanwhile, still using Bitcoin and buying Ethereum off on the side and keeping up with all these meme coins. At some point, I had the good fortune to kind of my path guided me through India for a couple months, being a yoga instructor, into software engineering and product management in the crypto space. And so while we've been in the crypto space, I happen to realize that payments are just such a massive opportunity that is just undertouched, right? Like right now, everybody's talking about integrating these payments into Stripe or crypto payments into Visa. And I'm like, no, no, no. The whole initial purpose of why cryptocurrency existed is so that we can have a financial system that anybody can access without intermediaries. And so in a nutshell, Coinsub makes it so that once you have crypto, you can spend your crypto, regardless of what wallet, what network, what ecosystem that you're on, and just kind of opening up the kind of freedom of basically the financial system freedom to everybody and building on top of the infrastructure that's already there.
Yeah, that's a great intro, man. I really want to a little bit get into why you chose to be in this space specifically. Like, what drove you in? Like, what was the thing that really, really got you to get into the space and realize that this was the future?
Dude, I couldn't buy my LSD online any other way than crypto. And that might seem like a really, really small thing, right? But fundamentally, what that means is that the demand for global commerce, and sometimes there's legal things to buy online too. The demand for global commerce has outstripped the ability for the payment rails to keep up. Now, in some cases, it's because it's a controlled substance, But in some cases, like we've got a contractor and a couple employees out in Turkey. There's really not a good way for them to pay, for me to pay them from the US, right? They have to go around and like register a US company or do some kind of fake stuff anyways. And so that was kind of my aha moment a decade ago of like, wow, this thing is going to have some serious potential. And my aha moment now of, oh, wow, for legal things, it still has potential.
Yeah, dude, it makes absolute sense, man. Honestly, for me, the journey has been very, very unique because I started out more, I had a stocks background. I was very much into stocks. And then, you know, in my stock brokerage account, they implemented this thing called Bitcoin. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, is there a CEO? And then it kind of just started going down a rabbit hole from there. So it's good to see you added another interesting story too as well to tell of how you got in. Some people I know also too as well. I remember around that time, my college roommate, because I was in university actually at the time in Germany, and he had actually, this guy was very, very interesting because he had built out like an AI trading bot for like stocks, and we were doing that, we were crushing it. And then also as well, he had access to the dark web, and that was about a time when I wasn't really too tech savvy, so I didn't understand how to get access on the dark web. I thought it was like something that like you had to be really, really intelligent to do, but I realized that anybody could kind of do it if you just had a little bit of tech background. But yeah, and he would tell me all the time about like how people would be able to facilitate trade through BTC. And at the time, I brushed over it because I just didn't really care. I was like, dude, I'm too busy playing basketball. I was playing in the Bundesliga, which is like the German league for basketball. And at the time too, as well, I was hustling. I was personal training too, as well. So I was doing that personal training, and then trying to crush it in the stock market and just travel. I was traveling a lot too, as well. So it's interesting to hear your journey. Where do you think? Do you think Coinsub can take the entire market of subscription payments for crypto? Is that where you see Coinsub going, or?
So all of Coinsub itself is a go-to-market strategy for a greater vision that I have, right? So whether or not we take the entire market, taking the entire market is not really feasible. Um, there are people who will need the value props that we're offering, i.e., kind of a decentralized peer-to-peer payment system that looks and functions pretty much just like a Stripe or a PayPal would, right? But then there are some people who do have access to credit cards and do have access to debit cards and do have access to traditional banking, where in their regional bubble, it works out fine for them, right? I mean, I still want to earn my credit card points. Man, Amex gives me like 10% on Netflix sometimes. I mean, unless crypto is going to give me like 20% off, like I'm not going to switch over. But there are people in the world, and you've realized as well, like if you're trying to, I believe you are starting basically an ed tech platform, right? And so if you're trying to get a global audience in, I think you've relatively quickly realized that there's not a single payment system out there that would enable you to accept money basically from almost every single human on earth, right? And so those are the gaps that we're trying to fill. Secondary, we went to market with subscriptions because it's very technically difficult to do from the crypto perspective. But again, that just is a business differentiator. The underlying technology, when I say crypto, I mean cryptographically tokenized asset, right? So we can move NFTs, we can move tokenized deeds, we can move, wrapped packets of data. We're not limited to payments. But of course, we have to start somewhere. And so payments is where I start. To speak a little bit about the future vision, right? Crypto is not a extension in advancement of the current fintech technology. It is a totally different system. Basically, it's almost more data infrastructure than it is fintech. Like, granted, those things go side by side, right? But imagine a financial system. We're so used to governments being baked in, centralized organizations being baked in, us having to ask for permission for us to spend our own money or withdraw our own money. That to me is an absolutely silly thing, because that relies on a lot of trust of these centralized organizations. And at some point or other, they all become self-interested because it's in the interest of the organization's survival to be self-interested, right? That's why you don't see a nonprofit on like the top 10 largest companies in the world. So at some point, organizations become self-interested and corrupt, and we've had a somewhat of a period of stability on a global scale, somewhat, right? But once that starts falling apart, it doesn't matter if someone's tokenized their CDBC or stablecoin or what. You know, the point of restriction again is going to be, U.S. saying, "Hey, you can't trade with Cuba," and the average user, the average person, just being like, "Yo, what does that have to do with me?" Right? Like at a government level, they bicker, and then essentially the individuals who have had next to no say in it are the ones that suffer. So what I imagine in the future is a system. We have a big focus on decentralizing. Right? There's a system that exists just like Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin is the electronic peer-to-peer cash, ours is the commerce layer on top of that, so that people can actually run businesses. Because I can't take 50, 100, 1,000 Bitcoin payments and then track that reasonably and scale a business. It's just not feasible. So we want that business layer, and then we want to decentralize that so that it outlives Jasper, it outlives Coinsub itself.
Imagine 10xing your earnings capacity to 100K per year while working remotely at the comfort of your own home. We are in the exponential growth phase of technological advancements. That means AI, AR, VR, robotics, and of course, Web3 technologies taking over the job market. At HeliCode Academy, we train students on Web3 hard skills and link them to employment in the job market. Find out more at helicode.xyz. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy. Yeah, I think that's part of the issues that I think a lot of people face, especially young founders, is are you going to lean towards, it's kind of a conflict, between founders, right? Are you going to lean towards decentralization, or are you going to lean towards, centralization, leveraging blockchain technology? Or is your ultimate goal to eventually, open source the software, make it overly permissionless, and allow anyone around the world to just be able to use it, and you could still automate it to where you still get your fees and everything? So I think that's it's tough, when you look at the landscape of crypto, and you have two sides of the coin. You have the people who are just trying to get rich, and then you have people and don't care about the actual ethos of why this whole thing was established anyways. And that's what I wanted to a little bit transition to, is just how do you feel about, do you think that we should have full autonomy over our wealth and our money and how we use it? Or do you think that there should be some government oversight over how we use our money? Because that's not how it used to be in the past. We kind of transitioned into that and kind of relinquished our control to an extent. And do you think that we're just transitioning back into how things were in the past, where we had full self-custody of our assets and we could use them as we please? And what do you think the future implications of that is, if you do believe in that theory of everyone self-custodying their wealth and assets and transacting it however they please?
Do I believe that people should pay taxes? Yes, right? Because we do exist as part of a larger kind of whole that does build infrastructure and requires money to make things happen. Now, if I'm paying my taxes and I'm doing things that are more or less legal, right? Then there really should be no restrictions upon my funds. And kind of how we align Coinsub with that is that we don't obfuscate transactions, right? So all the transactions, the audit trail, it's an auditor's dream, right? And we do make it easy for people to export things from an accounting perspective. And then also, should we develop into the future and certain classifications of things require us to hold money, like essentially say, 5% always just goes to this wallet for paying off government entities, right? And like that to us is just part of being a collective and benefiting from that. Now, should the government tell me that I can or can't spend arbitrarily, more or less arbitrarily on actually, at some point, it's not the government. telling us whether or not we can spend. It's the centralized organizations in the middle, say, call it a Stripe that says, hey, we don't really serve high risk industries. We don't really serve cannabis. And you'll notice in the US that, like, even though it's being fully decriminalized and legalized in certain areas, except on a federal level, I suppose, that it's still largely a cash based or cashless ATM based kind of environment. Um, Getting back to your initial question of, you know, is the future similar to the past of self custody, and what are the implications of that? I think the future will require, now we have an opportunity for digital self custody. That has never existed before, right? Technology has not come to that point where we could replicate the concept of cash and have each individual be able to hold it, because our phones weren't strong enough. Well, we didn't have phones, and our computers weren't strong enough to run essentially a blockchain ledger ourselves and at each copy it, right? So this is the earliest time we can really take the concept of cash and move it digitally. And that literally means I send it to you. Nobody in the middle is telling me whether or not I can, right? It is just purely automated, self-serve, permissionless self-custody system. And that has huge implications for the future, right? As you're probably aware yourself, that there are certain countries in the world where there's high rates of inflation, um, and those also, or basically high rates of inflation or poor local infrastructure. And so that has naturally led the populations to adopt crypto very, very quickly, giving people an alternative. At the end of the day, I think everything follows money and power, right? So giving power back to the individuals, giving the control over money back to the individuals will mean that some of the power shifts from perhaps governments back into each individual themselves, or kind of to the community.
Yeah, great point, man. And because for me, when I think about taxes, right, isn't it just kind of like an illusion? You know, if you understand how money kind of works and the mechanisms behind it, I just think what's the point if they just print the money anyways? It just gives you kind of like an illusion that you're contributing to a system that is for your benefit. But is it really? I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about taxes in general? I mean, I know it's like one of those touchy topics that a lot of people don't like to, but it's like, okay, yeah, people should pay taxes, but should if the supply is infinite and they print the money anyways, then what is the point of taking taxes when you can just print the money as a hidden tax to then pay for whatever it is that you need? And it's like, okay, I'll just steal from you 2% a year or 3% a year. I mean, that's what inflation is, right? I don't know how you think about it. Maybe it's a little bit too theoretical. I mean, but let me know.
Oh, I love this stuff, man. Um, Taxes are necessary on this on a closed scale of one single government entity or one single country. Yeah, you could just essentially print the infinite money, but on a global scale, printing infinite money essentially damages essentially your the value of your currency against the value of someone else's currency, right? So all of this would be solved. All of this would be solved if there weren't country lines, right? My thing is like, why do we still have so many countries in the world? Like, at what point does humanity just go, okay, cool, we're humans, and like we'd benefit a lot if we didn't waste so much money between essentially politics, military, things like that. Like the friction
Yeah.
in between any two differentiating different groups, right? Like there's got to be a better way and a more efficient way to mediate this kind of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but I think,
But
yeah,
you know,
taxes.
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I like my roads. I like the infrastructure. I think the schooling system is sufficient. I do think taxes are to an extent necessary.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think taxes would make more sense if the supply of money was finite. But if it's an infinite amount of money, it's just like, hey, I need some money to go send to Ukraine. Print, export to Ukraine, and yeah, that's basically how it's been. You know, hey, I need some resources from Africa. Oh, you don't want to give them to me? Okay, I'll just export war over there, and then create some instability, get what I want, and then come back. That's kind of how it's been. In terms of the country lines, I mean, that I think that's due to the colonialism, right? Even the ideologies, everything. It's all from it's Western ideology that's spread into becoming more of a global ideology. Some would say by force, others would say indirectly, and I think it's a combination of the two. The internet plays a huge role, I think, too, as well with that, in terms of the cultural influence of how the world thinks, what is demanded. When you look at let's say if there's a lack of opportunities in one, I don't know, developing country, somebody, let's say, travels to, let's say, the States or somewhere in the West for better opportunities, then they kind of have to readjust how they think, how they speak, to be able to facilitate what it is. They have to acclimate to the society, right? Well, that's kind of where the opportunities have been, throughout the course of the empire. But that's, again, due to creating instability in other countries so that they could be able to facilitate the current landscape that we have now. But we all know kind of it's not sustainable, like this whole export war, export inflation thing. It's just kind of, so that's why I'm just a little bit, when I think about taxes, I'm like, yeah, taxes make sense for me more. Like, if you're going to have a finite supply, you're not going to cheat the system to where you're like stealing my economic energy. You know what I mean? Because then it's like, okay, now the inflation is 10 to 20% nominally. They're saying that it's like 3 or 4%, whatever they're saying it is now. It's not.
Dude, I
But
just bought
nominally,
eggs for $10. I bought a 12-pack of eggs for $10 here in California. That inflation
that,
number is not what they say it is.
yeah. So they lie about the inflation numbers, and we know it's much higher, more trending towards 10 to 20 to 25%. So that means that every single year, to translate that into layman terms, I need to produce 10 to 25% or to 10 to 20% more each year. Somehow I need to be able to extract more value or increase my economic productivity, and it's not sustainable. So that's why when I think about the current landscape of the system, that's why I ask you, like with taxes, I think it makes sense in a trustworthy government that actually does the things that they say they're going to do, and not just export war, or not really take care of safety, or not really care about the people and steal all the money and keep it for themselves. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's why crypto is cool, right? Well, take Bitcoin first, not some of the other ones, because it's fundamentally a little bit different. There is a finite supply. Everyone knows where that supply is coming from. Well, everyone can individually see where it's coming from. Everyone can see where it's going. And there is no ability for any one party to unfairly take advantage of the system. Equal playing field. Now, the infrastructure itself has to be maintained. However, the way that it is essentially everyone who wants to be part of the infrastructure runs nodes and then has the chance to solve the algorithm for a block and be rewarded. So that, again, comes to being very fair, that the money goes to the people who are maintaining the infrastructure. And then for everyone else who's participating, there is a gas fee that is paid in order to make sure that the people who are maintaining the infrastructure are incentivized algorithmically to process your transaction. So to me, there's a sort of beauty in the autonomy of that. Now, the future goes a lot of different ways, right? But end state, I wonder if lines start being drawn by geography, because so far it's the easiest way to control things, or whether or not if lines get drawn by essentially much more digital warfare, right? Imagine where every single individual is plugged in to a kind of permissionless financial system. Now, it's basically just the size. Well, I guess it goes back to the size of the economy, and then being local really helps, because you and I would link up and be like, all right, cool, let's solve this. We want our amenities. So I guess it'll always still, like, geography is always going to have something to do with it. Sorry if I'm sidetracking.
Picture this. You're an inspiring computer science major. You have the 4-year degree program finished. You get out, start looking for work within the job market, and then you realize that there's no jobs. What you end up doing is you become an Uber driver because you realize that that piece of paper that you were chasing was actually worthless. The reality is, most institutions are behind. HeliCode solves this problem by teaching you on-demand Web3 tech skills in a short duration of time and links you to employment with our job placement services. And the best part is, you can work remotely. Find out more at helicode.xyz. And as always, see you, Space Cowboy. That's why I'm such an advocate for, cryptocurrency and Web3 technology, because I really think that, I truly believe that most governments have failed us, irrespective of location geographically. And I'm at the stage where I feel like a lot of people, or some people, are starting to slowly wake up to transition into more self-sustainment and starting to realize that they need to take control of their finance, need to take control of their health. Because when I look at, for instance, the states as a case study for what I'm talking about, everything is about money, right? Even down to healthcare. Healthcare isn't really meant to really help people. It's really just to extract liquidity, right? They have solutions. If you look at globally, I've traveled a lot, so I've seen people being able to solve, things like HIV, like just organically. And I know they have the solutions. It's just they're not implementing them because, well, they want you to be passive income for X amount of years through getting a pill every single week. And same thing with the food. If you look at the food quality, it's not great. So again, when I refer back then to the taxes, it's like, okay, yeah, you got roads, but that's facilitated through an entrepreneur anyway. Everything's facilitated through an entrepreneur. So it's kind of like the tax system for me. Maybe you may disagree with me, but it's a good conversation to have. It's like I, as an entrepreneur, create value, and then I extract the value, and then you take some of the value that I've extracted, and then you disperse that value based off of what you think where that value should go next, because you think that you're more efficient than me at, let's say, food, or let's say health, or let's say roads. But the reality is you're not, right? The reality is you're someone that maybe never even built a business. You're just someone who came up the ranks, good at talking, was able to garner the attention of the masses, and then you were able to become the president, and you were through the help of the corporations who then lobby for their own interest. And this is kind of how I see the whole system. But maybe you have a completely different outlook. So I would be curious to hear your thoughts.
No, I would agree with you on that. I would agree with you that no matter how kind of brilliant the theoretical system is when it's first created, that over the course of years and generations, like the moment that it's change is usually driven by strong visionaries. It's very difficult to hand that same ethos, that same drive down, right? Even from, like that's why companies get incredibly devalued when their initial founder or founder, CTO, CEO group leaves, right? Is because I have a lot of conversations all the time about ethos and getting pulled this way or that way, but I've got my laser focus on a future vision. But that's almost the future vision could be a shared collective, but what I've got is unique to my set of moral values, my set of drive, and my set of ability to kind of bulldoze through things that would otherwise be in my way, or not stop along the way and pick up quick profits. So then my question to you then, if humans are going to be continually fallible, then what about AI? Right? Humans are fallible in how they execute upon even often the rules that they themselves set. Right? Our judiciary system is arbitrary because it's ruled by humans. Why can one group get leniency and the other not? Why is it on a case by case basis? To me, perhaps it ought not. Right? Thus seeing kind of some of the discrimination against certain groups or socioeconomic statuses. Someone that bumps into someone that, like a quote unquote law enforcing officer bumps into someone and says, "Hey, I choose whether or not to let you off easy or write you a ticket or arrest you." That choice to me should never be in their hands.
Yeah, dude, this is a great conversation to have, honestly, man. And I knew we were gonna have a great conversation, but this is good, so far. So AI, here's my issue with AI is that the ones that are being created currently right now have a certain level of bias. So
Yes.
how do we then remove the bias from the AI so that it can be as even as possible in terms of its decision making and as level-headed, you know? So that's my only issue with AI is, there's some censorship with some, and so are we going to open source it? Like how do we plan to in the future be able to tell history, because the history, for instance, that has been sold to us is BS, right? So when you
Oh,
look at things like,
tokenized. Hey, go ahead. Go ahead.
go ahead, no, tell me, tokenize what?
Tokenized fucking data, right? Like tokenized history, like itself, right? Like why do we not have a fucking like Wikipedia, like a on-chain Wikipedia, right? So that literally you look back and there is no censorship. You can just check articles, check dates, query something that is not algorithmically done so much as you just go, what happened in the 1980s on this, and you don't get someone 2004 who's talking about it. You get someone, you get the all the data from 1980, right? And to me, that's we now have one of the few ways to preserve against manipulation of data through blockchain. And so,
Yeah,
why not store news articles? Why not store actual like current present moment events that have occurred? Because as you know, and as I know, that this stuff gets changed throughout history. But with the
yeah, of
AI,
course.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm thinking blockchain can be used because I used to be a blockchain maximalist. At one point, I was like, okay, everything could be solved with the blockchain, But for sure, history and also I would say the data preservation. It's so freaking important, man. It's so important, especially in today's time when we're in this misinformation era, where a lot of people don't know what's kind of true. The difference between me and a lot of people is that I verify things. Like I don't trust, I verify. So I'll literally go and fly to an Egypt and go and see, and I'm like, oh, well,
Oh yeah,
this
man.
looks obvious. Yeah, I'll fly to a Ghana, and go see, and then I'll go to Latin America, or I'll go there. I want to see it myself, and then I'll be able to, because I truly believe that I trust myself more than I trust anybody else. So because there's not many people that have my wide array of skill sets. I'm a warfare specialist. I did 4 years in the Army, 9 months in Afghanistan. I am really expert in macroeconomics, microeconomics, geopolitics, and also technology. So, and also, I've traveled around the world, so I have so much different angles. I have a panoramic viewpoint, of stuff, and I can see things for what they. And also, the main thing that's different for me, I think, than a lot of people when trying to decipher information is that I'm not on the internet. So I get all my intel from either my networks, or from flying to locations, or from going direct to let's say the Google or the ChatGPT, or reading a book, right? Instead of the information getting inserted to me by it getting fed to me on a timeline. And I hadn't been on the internet for almost 10 years. And I just got back on just to market my brand and et cetera. So I think that's a very unique thing. I don't think I could be recreated, because now you're kind of forced to be on the internet or you're a dinosaur. And yeah, so I think moving forward, blockchain, especially too, when you look at voting, like why isn't that should have been implemented a long time ago on our phones? People are still waiting in lines like it's 1950, 1940. Like, what are we doing? Like, we should easily be able to download an app, have everything on a blockchain, and be able to verify the data and when we vote, and also have our DIDs, digital identifiers, whether that's NFTs or whatever it is that's linked to us, to be able to facilitate, so there's no double vote problem, right? I don't know what you think about these sort of ideologies, or yeah, what are your thoughts on that? You're on mute.
That's a lot of different things. One, I also like that you verify your information, right? There's certain times that things make it into news. As before starting Coinsub, I was trying to dig into certain market data points, right? And I get very, very widely varying ones of news, predictions, and things like that. And I always try to trace it back to the primary source, right? I feel like people stopped getting taught that at some point, or stopped finding the importance of it. But what I realized was it was just a circular loop. One random company referred to another company's Like one company referred to a McKinsey article. The McKinsey article is just written by some associates or some analysts there that referred to another freaking article of that same data point that referred to UBS. And it took me like quite a few hours, but I did finally find that UBS article, and it's not written by subject matter experts. That one was just a post by I think a junior analyst of kind of a trend report. And where are they getting that? I mean, probably the same way that we in high school or college extrapolated some information. So yes, questioning the information that is out there and being able to validate it and creating your own hypotheses rather than hearing someone's essentially one sentence summary of it tinged with their kind of perspective is something that it becomes rarer and rarer nowadays. And I see this stuff all the time, especially in crypto news. Everyone's just self-referential when we know well through our conversations, right? We know how this works, and to the people that are listening, it's there's a lot of funding behind the scenes that pulls the strings that says, oh man, like imagine if you had you had like $100 million fund or $500 million fund, and you wanted to put a little bit into every crypto company in kind of the areas that you want. Then of course you're going to make those crypto companies work together, and of course you know how to market things really well and get them to large partnerships. That sounds great, but when you look underneath the hood, it is the closest thing to a pyramid scheme on a global scale that I am personally at least aware of. And I don't think the people in the cog themselves, and not even some of the partners of these funds realize how much of a role they're playing in just this raw pyramid scheme where the whole purpose is to find market liquidity. And so you find these founders who have these good narratives, or maybe can sell you a good narrative. And this is great. We can build a community around this. And then you get them to TGE and do a token. And then the poor retail people buy this. And then the founder goes, well, that's great. I raised $3 million, but 2.5 million of that just went to community building and listing. And I'm a B2B product. So that's so question everything with a grain of salt, right? I was doing day trading for a little bit while I was being a yoga instructor. Because I had said, fuck this. I'm not doing corporate stuff anymore. I'm going to go be a yoga instructor. I'm going to go help people. I'm going to go figure out the meaning of life. I'm going to travel the world and understand, why are all these religions have, common threads? Where does this all come from, right? And so I said, screw this. And so while I was doing that on the side, I was day trading because, of course, got to take care of family, got to take care of, the money does talk. Got to be able to donate to places. And then I realized, oh, my God, I can't dig any deeper. I see, I don't know, FX Street saying something about it, or whatever, all these alpha groups saying posts about these different tokens, and they know jack shit because they're not the writer's not technical. So I was like, you know what? I want to understand why. I want to be able to understand, this is back a couple years ago, what is the difference between a Polygon and a Solana, right? Or Ethereum, right? And it is so incredibly different, right? I started with the basics of what the hell is blockchain technology? What is blockchain? Why is it interchangeably being used with crypto? And of course we can jump into more technical things later if anyone actually cares. But to understand the core principles of a technology or industry yourself, then makes it so that you can become a valuable producer, not just of money, granted that's important, but also of actual intellectual property, thoughts, and ideas.
Yes, absolutely. Dude, you broke that down beautifully, man. And, when you talk about the founders that fail, is it also partly due to the fact that a lot of them that are being handed this money they don't have any experience? Some of these guys are in their early 20s. And I'm just how are they? I saw a meme coin that raised $200 million. I forgot which one it was. But in my head, I'm just this can't be a 50-year-old dude. It's got to be a young 25 something. And my thing is, are they handing off the money too early? And is it that also another thing that I thought about too as well is the cost per client acquisition, right? So in Web 2, one of the things that was able to lower the cost of a client acquisition was the ability to have ads, right? So concentrated ads, targeted ads, right? Niche ads. So that way you could then take $1,000 and you could you have your Google ads, your Facebook ads, your Instagram ads, and you'd be able to niche it down to exactly your ideal client. Whereas in the Web3 space, we still haven't figured out the right packaging to be able to target direct wallets. Like say, okay, this guy trades NFTs all the time, or this guy's always in the metaverse, because you can see everything on chain, you just don't know who it is, obviously. So I'm thinking, is part of the issue the lack of customer acquisition tools that help to concentrate that marketing and target it more so that it lowers then the burn rate for the founder, so he doesn't feel like, well, I'm not going to be able to facilitate the thing that I wanted to facilitate in the first place anyways, so I might as well just say what the hell with it and try to maybe raise more money. Because in the Web3 mindset right now, it's how can I raise more money when I ran out of money, and that's the business model. Whereas it should be, how can I raise money to actually build the actual business model that generates actual profit through actual value creation. And I think that's part of the issue that we're facing. But let me know your thoughts or your angle on this specifically, because I've been thinking about it.
It's all about vision and walking back from it, right? Like, to me, the steps are quite clear. To some of, and that becomes increasingly difficult to communicate, right? Of, listen, if my end goal is kind of this decentralized vision, then it basically net improves the market size and improves value kind of on a human scale by implementing blockchain technology to enable essentially more fluidity globally and within each transaction. Then I know the steps to walk back from it, because that's a future state. And then I just need to peg it to the current adoption on a kind of country and industry by industry scale, and then walk back from that of what's the business model that actually enables me to be self-sustaining, right? So it all comes down to what is their absolute end goal, right? If their end goal is to make a couple single digit millions or double digit millions, and they're happy with that. If their end goal is to be acquired, then there's not really a vision there, right? In which case, these founders are kind of, there's not a clear roadmap when you give them, they become much more reactive, right? Whereas I go, okay, great. Like in the case of Trump getting elected, here's the plan. In the case of Kamala being elected, here's the plan, given, their different fiscal policies and stances, right? So all of that kind of connects relatively back easily. But I've had these conversations where investors or VCs at least are like, hey, make sure you reach, you raise like 18 to 24 months. And I go, so you want me right now, when capital is the most expensive it could possibly be, to raise for much more capital than I think I need, and even with contingencies, given that our target for success is not how many flashy things we can get, but pure and simple revenue numbers, right? Like, to me, there's just this major disconnect where there's almost a lack of trust, and people play into these trends of like, it takes a ton. It takes such a long time to do this startup space because they assume that everybody else is taking a long time, but they don't realize that these other people are probably never actually going to make it. I got off the phone with my buddy yesterday. He used to be a doctor and he got into business. And like he bootstrapped 2 separate businesses now, I think within a course of 18 months, to profitability and single digit millions in recurring revenue. His only thing was they tended to be brick and mortar businesses. And so there was a maximum cap on how big it could get, right? But you look at people like that, and then you try to like look at people who are like, yes, let's spray and pray. Let's get a huge community. Let's monetize later. Let's go throw some yacht parties with our investor money. I look at this, I'm like, what the hell is going on with you guys, right? Like, the entire space baffles me. Of, if I'm confident that we're going to exit or be incredibly lucrative here the next 2 to 3 years, why would I give a single dollar to investor allocation if I didn't have to, right? Because evaluations for a company only go up, right? So say at 20 million valuation, if I give $2 million of allocation, that's 10%. But if my revenue next year is going to be 2 to 5 million. That means I just gave away 10% for something I'm going to make back in a year, right? And
Yes.
then if I 10x that, 100x that again, that just means for 10% of the company early on, I gave away for actually what would be equivalent to a month or 2 months worth of revenue. I gave away 10% of the company, right? So if
Yeah.
a founder looks at it from that perspective and then looks and it is a slightly, basically has a lot of conviction about his and the company's future, then raising a lot of money early on is a terrible idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's one of those chicken and the eggs, right? It's like, okay, I'm generating revenue. I maybe don't need funding, but maybe I want to accelerate the funding. And what if I'm not generating revenue when I'm pre-revenue? So maybe I need the funding to then generate the revenue. It's like, what do? We're going through this too as well. I've talked multiple times with my co-founder, and right now, hopefully, we're about to close our first round here shortly. So, jinx, knock on wood, So, um, so, so yeah, for me, it's one of those things. Like I said, I'm going to see how it goes and see if it was the right. The only way to know is like as your company evolves, right? And you then get to see, okay, was this the right decision for us to make? Was it not? And ultimately for me, especially what we built with Helicode is, did the customer win, right? Did Africa win? Did the Global South win? Because that was the whole point of the product, right? Did Web3 win, right? That's the whole point of the product, is to help to export intellectual human resource to, the globe, right? And for a cheaper or more affordable cost basis. And if I'm able to do that, then I'm able to cut the entire startup company's burn rates, right? Their expenses for labor, which is one of the highest, if not the highest expense,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm able to do that, then I'm able to push the space forward, because now you have more room for marketing, more room for R&D, right? More room for sales, right? In your treasury. And this is the big brain thought process of why we decided to build what we built. And then on top of that, Africa, people in the global south, they get hiring and employment opportunities, and also they're able to get a high level skill that they can leverage to solve problems on the ground, right? So when I look at developing a product, I'm like, how are you thinking as a founder? Are you thinking about, did I win? How am I doing? Is it me, 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 or is it them, 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 them? And so I think that's the nuance that I notice in a lot of Web3. It's a lot of greedy founders, and a lot of them don't have a lot of experience. Like when you really start looking deep into them, it's
Yeah.
like, wait, what did you build? What did you build before? What have you done? Why are they giving you $100 million? It's crazy, man.
Stay tuned for part 2, and as always, see you, Space Cowboy.